So I actually haven't spoken about the Batman 2021 in around a month now, with my last video on it going over the latest details coming from Matt Reeves and where he spoke to Nerdist about the meaning behind some of the film, going over his thoughts in regards to his own approach when making the movie, such as the humanity and emotion of his upcoming The Batman. So definitely check out my breakdown video on that in the cards above, just in case you did miss it. But other than that, there hasn't really been all too much to discuss when revisiting news for the Batman, because as we all know, with the illness that has taken over the world, all productions from TV to movies have completely halted, and as a result even caused delays to the projects, which also means little to no news on them. And even with that said, a whole month is far too long to go without making a video covering any little tidbits about the movie, so here I am, back again, doing just that. Even if there's just a shred of info, we're covering it, and today, it's actually pretty interesting because I wanted to go over a little speck of something to talk about when it comes to the movie, and that is from the Batman's very own Alfred Pennyworth, Andy Serkis, of which I still know there's quite a few fans out there who aren't massively sold on this casting, of which I do want to dive into a bit of that later and delve into other aspects of what he teases to us in just a few moments. So Andy Serkis recently spoke to Lad Bible and teased that the Batman will be darker than previous films, and when asked whether fans were right to expect a darker, broodier Batman, Andy Serkis laughed and responded with, "I would say that's not far from the truth." Now he continues to say it's very much about the emotional connection between Alfred and Bruce. That's really at the center of it, and it really is an exquisite script that Matt has written. Now when discussing the role further, he said he isn't looking to mimic previous performances, rather that he is instead focusing on creating his own version of the iconic character, going on to say that Kane was fantastic, his Alfred was legendary, I couldn't even begin to go there really. You find it for yourself, it's like playing these iconic roles in Shakespeare, you go back, you revisit them, and you have to make it your own and see what it is about the character that connects with you and your personal Venn diagram. And that's when he finally says, "I was literally halfway through shooting my part in it when we got shut down, so it will be interesting to see when that resurfaces, how it has been affected by the lockdown, but it's going to be a beautiful film." So when it actually comes to what Andy Serkis has said there, he's admitted that the film consists of a darker, broodier Batman, and how that just isn't far from the truth. And I don't think that this should come as a huge surprise to many in the fandom. Where do you think it's up for debate that DC films shouldn't necessarily always be darker or broodier? When it comes to Batman, I mean it's a no-brainer. I mean, with the Batman 2021, especially surrounding a Bruce Wayne who has only literally been Batman for a couple of years and is heavily involved in the focal point in the timeline of his career and where he's undergoing this massive transformation with this first movie's plot, it spells out that this film will serve for a darker and broodier version of that character for sure. I mean, as Reeves teased not so long ago, and what I went over in my previous Batman update video, he discussed how he wanted to do not an origin tale, but a tale that would still acknowledge his origin, in that it formed who he is. And he went on further to say that, like this guy, he's majorly struggling, and this is how he's trying to rise above that struggle, but that doesn't mean that he even fully understands, it's the whole idea of the shadow self and what's driving you, and how much of that you can incorporate, and how much of it you're doing that you're unaware of. There's something in there that feels very psychological, very emotional. And on that note, with what Matt Reeves is saying, and with Bruce going through all of this in the movie, I mean, who else does he really have that is close to him other than his lifelong friend and parental figure in Alfred? Except I do expect quite a different Alfred than what we're used to seeing. I mean, as for Serkis and how he even teased it himself, other Alfred iterations such as Michael Caine's were legendary to him, but when it comes to stepping into this role for himself, he doesn't really want to mimic those other performances, but rather make it his own. And I think that couldn't be more relevant for this iteration of Alfred. Not only would Serkis likely want to make it his own anyway, but I truly feel as though that this Alfred will display a different kind of Alfred we haven't actually even seen in live action before. I mean, because when it comes to Batman on screen, we've seen various iterations of the Dark Knight, yet with his trusted butler, it's usually mostly consistent. For example, Michael Caine being the somewhat older and frailer, lovable Alfred, which I'm not saying isn't normal, by the way, as that usually is the way it goes when you're thinking of putting Alfred into a Batman story. However, for the type of movie that Reeves has in mind, I think Serkis' Alfred will show more of a brotherly relationship to Bruce Wayne, who's more hands-on than we've ever seen Alfred be before. Because we can't forget that because of us getting a much younger Bruce Wayne as well, and Batman in this film, who isn't even the fully fledged Dark Knight of Gotham, well, the same applies to his butler, Alfred. It's just very interesting to also hear Serkis say that the movie is very much about the emotional connection between Alfred and Bruce, and how that's really at the center of the movie. I mean, this could mean that instead of getting an Alfred who might stand back and let Bruce go out doing everything Batman, this Alfred might even step into it a lot more and even try and put his foot down at several parts in the movie, providing some of those more emotional moments between both of the characters. Now, assuming that Bruce Wayne has already been going out as Batman in this movie for some time, as the movie is supposed to be a couple of years into Batman's career, all while not doing the whole origin thing per se, but at the same time, in the grand scheme of Batman's career, this still being in his origin years, if you will. So I think it's safe to assume that Alfred somewhat approves of Bruce's vigilante extracurricular activities, if you will, but at the same time, it might be interesting, as I teased a second ago, if we saw some of those moments where Alfred didn't want Bruce to do a certain thing or didn't approve of him going out, and that caused some tension. But maybe due to Batman coming up against a much more formidable villain in this movie than that of his typical drug bust that Bruce and Alfred have likely been accustomed to in Bruce's first couple of years as the Dark Knight, or maybe even the crime families of which it's rumored who he's also been up against up until this point as well. Bottom line though, thus far he's got his hands dirty, but he hasn't been up against anything seriously threatening, and that will all change with the mastermind that is the Riddler, and thus make things feel very unprepared for both Bruce and Alfred. Adding a lot to that, as Serkis describes it, center of this movie, the emotional connection between Alfred and Bruce. And as we also know from Matt Reeves himself, that this movie's arc will allow for a huge transformation for Bruce, and I think as a younger Alfred in this movie, seeing Bruce go through that will be taking quite a toll on him to see, well, his Master Wayne go through that experience. Also, with this Alfred in general, I think he will be a lot more hands-on than what a lot of people are expecting. I mean, I don't think, at least for now, in this Reeves the Batman universe, there is any mention of Lucius Fox, and this Alfred has most certainly helped Pattinson's Bruce pimp out the Batsuit, the Batmobile muscle car, I mean, heck, even the Batcave probably, and I just can't wait to see a much younger hands-on Alfred who could also be fairly intimidating. I mean, we can't forget that Alfred in the comics has a history of being former SAS, he's an experienced military guy, and I think Andy Serkis could really engulf this younger portrayal of Alfred, who is more hands-on and protective of Bruce and acts more as a bodyguard than a butler, and even a mentor of sorts at times. And Serkis can be quite intimidating in a role, in a way. I mean, the thing that comes to my mind is that fairly, well, somewhat recent role he had in Black Panther. He definitely wasn't portraying this frail butler type in there. He was actually very, very hands-on. So grind that role down to a more kind of friendly butler type, and you might have something that looks like the new Alfred Pennyworth in the Batman 2021 movie. But on another note, Matt Tomlin, who helped co-write The Batman, tweeted out when asked if he can talk about what movies he watched prior to writing The Batman, works that may have influenced his writing. He responded to that saying, "I can't safely add much other than what Matt has already put out there, but I will say that it gave me a great excuse to rewatch the animated series and literally triple my already heavy comic book collection." So why is he saying the animated series? Well, I think that definitely adds up to the kind of somewhat aesthetic that this film is going for. I mean, there's many things that the Batman the animated series has inspired in several different avenues in Batman down the years from when the animated series first came out, but this film has got many rumored aspects that I think that it will be borrowing from. Well, personally, the animated series for me and a lot of other people, it's very noir, detective driven, and what is one thing that Reeves is doing with the Batman is most certainly that. I mean, there was also rumors of blimps that could be appearing in the Batman, which may or may not be true, but then again, as we know in Batman the animated series, there was most certainly quite a lot of blimps. But the fact that he kind of teased here that it's been a great excuse to rewatch the animated series just really does sum up to me the core flavor of what this Batman trilogy will be like, and I feel like that will somewhat mirror the tone of the animated series. Not necessarily deliberate plot lines or storylines, but maybe some inspirations from characters, the feel of the city, just everything like that. But that is just about everything I have to discuss in today's The Batman update video, guys. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything Andy Serkis said. Do you see him being an Alfred in this new Batman universe? I mean, I definitely do. I said I would talk about this earlier, but briefly, I think Andy Serkis, I get how some people may not be seeing maybe the casting 100%, but I can definitely imagine this more harder, somewhat brotherly, maybe mentor figure to Bruce, rather than the typical frailer Alfred. I mean, just picture Andy Serkis as a much more hands-on Alfred, and I really do see that for Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne, and in this new world that Matt Reeves is forging. But other than that, guys, hope you liked the video. If you did, slap a like on it, as it really does show your support for the channel. Make sure you stay subscribed for more update videos like this on the Batman. Trust me, I will be making one whenever there is something relevant enough to talk about. But once again, thank you for joining me today. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you, Bat family, in the next video. Goodbye.